Ladies and gentlemen, please rise if you are able, as honors are rendered to the President and remaining standing for the arrival of their Majesties, King Charles III and Queen Camilla, and the playing of the national anthems of the United Kingdom and the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and First Lady Melania Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the United Kingdom, followed by the national anthem of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody. What a beautiful British day this is. And it really is. Your Majesties, members of the British delegation, friends, service members, and distinguished guests, welcome to the beautiful White House. Great honor to have you. Melania and I will never forget the spectacular honor Your Majesties showed us during our extraordinary visit to Windsor Castle last September. Now it is our tremendous privilege to host you, and you're going to have a wonderful short stay, but stay nevertheless. Then you're going over to Congress, and you're going to make a speech that's going to make everybody very envious of that beautiful accent of yours. Very elegant. He's a very elegant man. Here in the shadows of monuments to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, honoring the British King might seem an ironic beginning to our celebration of 250 years of American independence. But in fact, no tribute could be more appropriate. Long before Americans had a nation or a constitution, we first had a culture, a character, and a creed. Before we ever proclaimed our independence, Americans carried within us the rarest of gifts, moral courage, and it came from a small but mighty kingdom from across the sea. For nearly 2 centuries before the Revolution, this land was settled and forged by men, women who bore in their souls the blood and noble spirit of the British. Here on a wild and untamed continent, they set loose the ancient English love of liberty and the Great Britain's distinctive sense of glory, destiny, and pride. And that's what it is, glory, destiny, and pride. The American patriots who pledged their lives to independence in 1776 were the heirs to this majestic inheritance. Their veins ran with Anglo-Saxon courage. Their hearts beat with an English faith in standing firm for what is right, good, and true. In recent years, we've often heard it said that America is merely an idea, but the cause of freedom did not simply appear as an intellectual invention of 1776. The American founding was the culmination of hundreds of years of thought, struggle, sweat, blood, and sacrifice on both sides of the Atlantic. Fate drew a long arc from the meadow at Runnymede to the streets of Philadelphia that ran through the lives of people born and bred on the British code that no man should be denied either justice or right. American patriots today can sing "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty," only because our colonial ancestors first sang, "God save the King." We see today a living symbol of this centuries-old bond, just a few dozen feet to the left where I stand. There, Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth, an incredible woman who I had the privilege of getting to know. Queen Elizabeth II, very, very special woman who is very greatly missed on both sides of that mighty Atlantic. Long ago planted a young tree. It was a very young and beautiful tree, and look at it now. It's tripled in size and tripled in strength, very much as our nations have even more than tripled. Like our nation itself, it was laid with British hands but grew in American soil. Today it stands tall and proud, reaching ever higher. And this morning it reminds us that the mightiest of trees, like the greatest of nations, must be anchored by the strongest and deepest of roots. In the centuries since we won our independence, Americans have had no closer friends than the British. We share that same root. We speak the same language. We hold the same values. And together our warriors have defended the same extraordinary civilization under twin banners of red, white, and blue. My wonderful mother, Mary MacLeod, was born in Stornoway, Scotland, the Hebrides, and that's what they call very serious Scotland. There's no question about it. Some places they say, well, it wasn't really Scotland. The Hebrides, that's real serious Scotland. That's where they had their greatest of warriors, their greatest of warriors. She came to America at 19, met my incredible father. We loved him so much. We all loved him. We loved her. We loved him, Fred. And they were married for 63 years. And excuse me if you don't mind. That's a record we won't be able to match, darling. I'm sorry. Just not going to work out that way. We'll do well, but we're not going to do that well. 63 years. And my mother, I just see it so clearly. She loved, and I told the king this, she loved the royal family. And she loved the Queen. And anytime the Queen was involved in a ceremony or anything, my mother would be glued to the television. And she'd say, look, Donald, look how beautiful that is. She really did love the family. But I also remember her saying very clearly, Charles, look, young Charles, he's so cute. It's my mother. My mother had a crush on Charles. Can you believe it? Amazing how, I wonder what she's thinking right now. But beneath those beautiful flags, 8 decades ago, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Franklin Roosevelt famously met on a ship in the North Atlantic to outline a vision for the free world after World War II. That understanding of our nation's unique bond and role in history is the essence of our special relationship, and we hope it will always remain that way. The ship where the two great leaders met was called the Prince of Wales, the very title that His Majesty the King held longer than any other individual in British history, and he held it with great pride and respect. It's said that when Prime Minister Churchill first met this future king many decades ago, he was so impressed, he made the statement, he is so young to think so much and so well. And the bust of your great Prime Minister rests proudly again in the Oval Office. We're very proud to bring it back. We brought it back. Throughout His Majesty's life, the world has witnessed that same thoughtfulness which first struck Britain's greatest Prime Minister. His Majesty's intellect, passion, and devotion have been really a blessing to the British people. But not only to his own country, but to the cherished bond between the United States and the United Kingdom. And I am very certain that it will continue that way long into the future. In a few hours, His Majesty will stand in the heart of the United States Capitol as the very first British king ever to address a joint session of the United States Congress. So he's going to be addressing Congress, and I'm going to be watching. I was thinking of going, but they said, I don't know. That might be a step too far. I would love to go. It's not supposed to be protocol, but I would love to be with you. But there, the direct descendant of King George III will speak to the direct successor of the very body that gathered in Independence Hall on July 4th, 1776. If John Adams and George Washington or the King's fifth great-grandfather could see that sight, they might be absolutely shocked, but probably only for a moment. Surely they would be delighted that the wounds of war healed into the most cherished friendship. Think of that very, very long ago difficult war, and yet those wounds did indeed heal into the most cherished of friendships, most cherished. They would be moved beyond words to know that the soldiers who once called each other Redcoats and Yankees became the Tommies and the GIs who together saved the free world as brothers in arms and brothers in eternity, and nobody fought better together than us. If they could see us today, our ancestors would surely be filled with awe and pride that the Anglo-American Revolution in human freedom was never, ever extinguished, but carried forward across centuries, across oceans, and across history until it became a fire that lit the entire world. So today we look back on 250 years. Let us remember what has made our countries the two most exceptional nations the world has ever known. And together let us go forward with even stronger resolve to carry on our sacred devotion to liberty and to the traditions of excellence that have been our shared gift of all mankind. Your Majesties, thank you once again for making this important visit. We are so honored. May God forever bless the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and Northern Ireland, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise if you are able for the conclusion of the ceremony and departure of the official party.
Good afternoon, everyone. Later today, President Trump and the First Lady will welcome King Charles and Queen Camilla for a state visit here at the White House. First Lady Melania Trump has led all of the preparation for the state visit, which will honor the long-standing and special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. As I told many of you on Friday afternoon, I thought that would be my last time taking your questions until after my maternity leave. But given the attempted assassination of the president and, quote, top Trump administration officials, as the depraved shooter noted in his manifesto at the White House Correspondents Association dinner on Saturday evening, I felt it was prudent to be here today to answer your questions and inform the American people about how the administration is responding to yet another attempt on President Trump's life. Saturday was supposed to be a joyful evening, celebrating free speech and the First Amendment with all of you, members of the press. Instead, the night was hijacked by a crazed anti-Trump individual who traveled across the country to assassinate the president and as many administration officials as possible. This is the third major assassination attempt against President Trump in 2 years. No other president in history has faced such repeated, serious attempts on his life. First and foremost, the President, the First Lady, and everyone in this White House are extraordinarily grateful to the brave law enforcement professionals who sprang into action to apprehend the would-be assassin and keep all of us safe. The President would especially like to express his gratitude to the men and women of the United States Secret Service who acted with the utmost professionalism, courage, and sense of duty. This includes the heroic agent who took a bullet to the chest. Thankfully, he was saved by his bulletproof vest. Minutes after returning here to the White House to the Oval Office, despite fighting Secret Service to try to stay and keep the dinner going on Saturday, ahead of addressing you here in the briefing room, President Trump was intent on speaking to this brave agent to ensure he was okay, and the agent assured the president that he was. As you know, I was seated next to President Trump and the First Lady when the shots were fired before Secret Service swiftly moved us to safety backstage. The president's calm in the face of chaos, while yet another individual was trying to take his life, was really remarkable to witness, and it's something I will never forget. President Trump is fearless because he loves this country, and he is willing to put his own life on the line to deliver on the promises that he made to the American public who elected him here into the highest office in the land. And while we are blessed to have a fearless president, we should not live in a country where such constant fear of political violence permeates our society every single day. We can and we should have fierce disagreement in this country. As you all know, we disagree often, myself in this role and all of you in the news media, but those disagreements must remain peaceful. Debating, peaceful protesting, and voting are how we need to settle disagreements, not bullets. Nobody in recent years has faced more bullets and more violence than President Trump. This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party, and even some in the media. This hateful and constant and violent rhetoric directed at President Trump day after day after day for 11 years has helped to legitimize this violence and bring us to this dark moment. Those who constantly falsely label and slander the president as a fascist, as a threat to democracy, and compare him to Hitler to score political points are fueling this kind of violence. The left-wing cult of hatred against the president and all of those who support him and work for him has gotten multiple people hurt and killed, and it almost did so again this weekend. When you read the manifesto of this shooter, ask yourselves, how different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all. Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many. For example, as the First Lady of the United States pointed out this morning, just 2 days prior to the shooting, ABC's late-night host Jimmy Kimmel disgustingly called First Lady Melania Trump an expectant widow. Who in their right minds says a wife would be glowing over the potential murder of her beloved husband? And having experienced what I did with the First Lady on Saturday night, I can tell you that she was anything but that. This kind of rhetoric about the president, the First Lady, and his supporters is completely deranged, and it's unbelievable that the American people are consuming it night after night after night. As President Trump said on Saturday night at this podium, we as Americans must recommit ourselves to resolving our differences peacefully and uniting around the shared values that make our country great. The deranged lies and smears against the president, his family, his supporters have led crazy people to believe crazy things, and they are inspired to commit violence because of those words. It has to stop. And one more point. Saturday night served as yet another reminder of how important it is to fund the Department of Homeland Security. It is shameful that the United States Congress has kept this vital agency defunded for 73 days. The longest shutdown of a federal agency in U.S. history. The Secret Service is a vital component of DHS, and it has been directly impacted by this reckless political gamesmanship. Everyone in this room who was there on Saturday night witnessed the heroes of Secret Service and federal law enforcement jump into action in the face of grave danger and uncertainty. Agents put their own lives in harm's way to protect the president, the First Lady, the Vice President, and members of the cabinet. One agent can be seen in video footage literally jumping onto the stage, not knowing where the attacker was or where the bullets were coming from at that point, to place his body in front of the President of the United States. These men and women are heroes. They perform their duties daily, and they have children and families too, and they do it despite the political turmoil surrounding their agency. Make no mistake, this defunding of DHS should be a national scandal. If Republicans defunded DHS and we saw another attempted assassination on a Democrat president, I would hope that the media coverage would be relentless and unforgiving, and I hope that it continues to be now. With the World Cup, America 250, the 2028 Olympics, and a presidential election all ahead, the Democrats' obstruction is placing an enormous and totally pointless burden on the Secret Service that can get more people killed. Enough is enough. There should be no further debate about this. Democrats need to do what President Trump has been calling on them to do for 73 days in a row and fund the Department of Homeland Security, period. This is a national emergency, and every member of Congress needs to put their country over party and get the Department of Homeland Security funded. With that, I will take a few of your questions today. Daniel, thank you for being here. Why don't you kick us off?
Thank you, Caroline. The president, Saturday after the assassination attempt, came here. He emphasized that law enforcement did their job, keeping everyone safe at dinner. House Speaker Mike Johnson came out and said he believes the president needs greater protection. What is the White House's message to the millions of Americans who wake up here today nervous, uneasy about the safety of the president at events like this and the safety of other cabinet members?
Well, we certainly understand their fears and their worries. As you heard from the president himself, he continues to have trust in the United States Secret Service. As I just said, these are great men and women who are doing their jobs and performing their duties honorably. As we all witnessed on Saturday evening, within minutes, the president, the first lady, the vice president, members of the president's cabinet were ushered out of the room. The perpetrator who sought to inflict massive harm, as we all now know with the release of the manifesto on administration officials and the president himself, was stopped at the security perimeter that was set up. He tried to charge through it, as you saw on video, and he was quickly neutralized by Secret Service, and thank God that he was. With that said, obviously the White House is always asking the tough questions and ensuring the safety of the president. I understand there will be a meeting early this week convened by the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles with top DHS leadership, members of the United States Secret Service, and our own operations team here to ensure the safety and the security of the president, as we do have many of these major events moving forward. So we're always monitoring operations and procedures, always asking the tough questions to ensure the president is safe, and the American people should be assured there's no higher priority for the president and his staff than the president's safety.
Caroline, Friday you said that you thought that gaggle out of the sticks would be your last one for your baby. Back in 2024, when the president had the attempt on his life in Butler, you cut your maternity leave short back then. You're obviously back here today after Saturday. Can you just elaborate a little bit why you felt it was important to be here to bring to the media and talk to the American people from the stand?
Sure. It's sort of crazy timing when you put it that way for both children with 2 assassination attempts against the president. I'm honored to work in this job. I view this job as the president's spokesperson and the White House spokeswoman as public service. It's not just any job. I'm honored to do it, and I'm honored to work and speak on behalf of President Trump, who has faced unprecedented adversity and challenges, and I'm honored to work for him. And again, as I witnessed on Saturday night, just his dogged resolve and determination to get back onto the stage, and he was pushing Secret Service and law enforcement to allow him to address, and that really, I think, hopefully gives the country the type of strength that we need. And I certainly know, as his spokeswoman, and I can speak on behalf of all of the staff here at the White House, the president inspires all of us to just keep going and keep fighting every day. Thanks, Daniel. And congrats to you on your new baby. He's beautiful. Aisha.
Just from the rhetoric, you mentioned the First Lady and Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's comments were, "Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow." And he said this days before the shooting, but there does seem to be a normalization of rhetoric about assassinating this particular president. How can this administration try to put an end to this?
Well, I think you heard it directly from the president on Saturday night, Aisha, that in his words, we need to recommit ourselves as a country to toning down the rhetoric and to unifying around what makes our country great. That's true of everyone who works in this White House, but as I said, it's also true of everyone who has a voice and a platform across this country, whether you're on television, a podcast host, people listen, and when you have mentally disturbed individuals across the country who are listening to this crazed rhetoric about the president day after day after day, it inspires them to do crazy things. And unfortunately, it's not just the media, it is the entire Democrat Party has made their pitch to voters across the country that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to democracy, that he is a fascist, and that they compare him to Hitler. I mean, these are despicable statements that the American people have been consuming for years. And so many mentally perturbed individuals are led to believe these words are truth and then are inspired to act on it. I have a whole host of examples that we can share with you after. It is pages and pages of major Democrat Party elected officials saying, such as Rep. Hakeem Jeffries just this month said, "We are in an era of maximum warfare everywhere all the time." Governor Josh Shapiro said heads need to roll within the administration. Senator Alex Padilla said people are, quote, dying because of fear and terror caused by the Trump administration. Senator Elizabeth Warren, President Trump is making the country look like a, quote, fascist state. Senator Adam Schiff saying President Trump using a dictator playbook. Senator Ed Markey calling President Trump a dictator, saying that this administration's actions are authoritarianism on steroids. Governor J.B. Pritzker, "Never before in my life have I called for mass protest disruptions. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace." You have Rep. Presley saying, "We'll see you in the streets." Rep. Monica McIver, a Democrat representative on Capitol Hill, "We will not take this shit from Donald Trump. He thinks he's a dictator. We are at war." These are Democrat elected officials calling for war against the President of the United States and his supporters. I could go on and on, but again, when you have people in positions of power that are saying things like this every single day for years, you are inspiring violence by people who are already mentally ill. And that's what we've seen against this president for far too long.
This is disinformation and misinformation online. There will be bite-sized clips that will go viral to the point where there are Americans in this country that believe that what happened Saturday night was staged. How does this White House tackle that with social media companies out there, whether it's X, Facebook, Instagram? How do they work with these companies to make sure that doesn't get out of control?
It's certainly a good question, Aisha. I don't have tangible answers for you on what we're doing with social media companies, if anything at all. What I will say is it's very important to us that we get the truth and the facts about this case and any case out there as quickly as possible to dispel some of that crazy nonsense that you do see running rampant online. And I think the Department of Justice and the FBI thus far have done a good job of disseminating the truth and the facts about this alleged attempted assassin, the perpetrator in this case, and I understand he'll be arraigned in court very soon. You all see that, and the Department of Justice will be giving a briefing and an update later today. So as far as we're concerned, just providing maximum transparency, and hopefully people will believe the truth rather than the lies and the conspiracies that so often do go crazy on social media. Rachel.
Thanks, Caroline. Does the administration view this as a security failure, or did the protocols work as they were designed?
The president has said he believes that the protocols worked. Again, you had a perpetrator who tried to breach the security parameter that was set up by Secret Service, and he was running as fast as he could and was immediately neutralized moments later. And again, having been right up there on the stage with the president and the First Lady, I can tell you it was seconds before we were told to get down, and it was seconds before we found ourselves in the hold room backstage. It all happened literally within a matter of seconds. The president, the vice president, and the First Lady being pulled to safety. That is not done if there's a lapse. So Secret Service did their jobs well. They communicated with one another to remove the president and the vice president to safety as quickly as they could, and obviously to neutralize the shooter as well. And thank God they did, because if that man was allowed into that ballroom, it would have been a much different scene.
And just one more follow-up on just how the White House could be rethinking security protocols going forward. I mean, we all remember after the attempted assassination in Butler, there were indoor rallies that were held after that. Is that out of the question, changing any additional security protocols when it comes to how the president does these events that are outside of the White House?
I definitely wouldn't say changes are out of the question. I think, again, that it's up to the White House here, and we view it as a great responsibility to ensure the maximum safety of the president and the vice president and the entire cabinet. And so we're always looking for ways to improve security. I think if you just sit here and say everything is perfect all the time, that's not a good way to operate. And so the White House will continue to engage with DHS and with Secret Service to find ways to improve and strengthen security. But as far as Saturday night is concerned, the president was satisfied with the response, and he's very grateful to the men and women who provided the response for him and his wife and members of his team.
Caroline.
Deanna.
Thanks, Caroline. The president has talked about rescheduling the dinner within 30 days. Does he have a specific venue in mind, and would he consider hosting it at the White House?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a room big enough here at the White House, which is another point to be made, and the president is absolutely right. It's why the White House Ballroom project is not just a fun project for President Trump, like you will read in the media. It is actually critical for our national security that a larger, secure building on this complex, which is the most secure complex in the world, is built to accommodate not only large amounts of guests, but also the president, the vice president, members of the cabinet. The line of succession in this country should be able to gather freely in safety without the fear of threats or political violence. And the White House Ballroom will provide that. And so it's critical that we get this project done as quickly as possible.
Iran as well.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Caroline. Two questions, if that's all right. First, on the security situation on Saturday, kind of a follow-up here. Previous administrations have sent both the president and the vice president to the dinner, but after the foiled attack on Saturday, if the dinner is rescheduled, would President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance both plan on attending? And is it wise to have both of them in the same spot, given the presidential line of succession that you mentioned a second ago?
It's definitely a good question, and I know that it's one that will be raised. I can assure you the president intends to attend the event, as he has told all of you publicly. I don't want to rule in or out the vice president's attendance, but certainly that's a conversation that will take place.
Iran has proposed a mutual reopening of the strait, leaving the nuclear discussion for later in the process. Given that the nuclear program has been a red line for this administration, would the president agree to that kind of phased negotiation?
Well, only because it's been reported. I will confirm the president has met with his national security team this morning. The meeting may be ongoing, maybe not. I don't want to speak affirmatively because I was prepping to come out here, but the proposal was being discussed. I don't want to get ahead of the president or his national security team. What I will reiterate is that the president's red lines with respect to Iran have been made very, very clear, not just to the American public, but also to them as well.
So they're considering that phased approach?
I wouldn't say they're considering it. I would just say that there was a discussion this morning that I don't want to get ahead of, and you'll hear directly from the president, I'm sure, on this topic very soon.
I'm going to ask you about the Fed chairman, but first, 3 assassination attempts in 3 years. Is this going to change the type of events that the president goes to?
Well, again, that's going to be part of the conversations moving forward. But as you heard from President Trump, he does not want these deranged lunatics and these grave acts of political violence to change our American way of life. And I think it's a very brave thing for him to say. It'd be very easy for him to just hunker down here at the White House where he knows he's safe, but the president wants to be out across the country. He wants to go across the country to meet with Americans. He wants to celebrate the 250th birthday of our nation's anniversary this summer. As you know, we're gearing up for a big UFC fight here on the South Lawn. So there's many exciting events I know the president wants to be part of and will be part of moving forward. He's undeterred in that way, and it's something that inspires all of us here to keep going.
Senator Tillis is now dropping his objection to allowing Kevin Warsh to be confirmed because the DOJ has closed their investigation. Is the president satisfied that an inspector general report into the Federal Reserve is enough to look into these renovations?
The president understands that the inspector general has greater tools at their disposal, perhaps even more powerful than a grand jury, to continue investigating the financial mismanagement of the Fed building, which is a priority for the president. Look, he's a builder himself. When he sees something has a lot of cost overruns, is taking too long, and in this case ripping off the American taxpayer, he wants to get to the bottom of it. I understand Senator Tillis put out a statement saying he'll support Kevin Warsh's confirmation. That has been our position all along from day one. He is more than qualified for the job, and we look forward to working with the Senate on his swift confirmation process. Megan.
As a follow-up on Warsh, will the president be satisfied once the Fed's Inspector General finishes that investigation, even if it finds no evidence of wrongdoing?
Well, that's a hypothetical question. I'll let the president speak on it when we see the results. It's obviously far too early to say.
And relatedly, as a follow-up, now that it looks like Warsh will be confirmed by the end of Jay Powell's term, is he still considering firing Jay Powell if he stays on as governor after that?
I haven't talked to him about it specifically, but I think the president will be satisfied once Kevin Warsh is confirmed as the Fed chair, which he should be. Karen.
On Iran, the president had said last week that the U.S. has started the process of clearing the Strait of Hormuz of mines. Do you have an update on how many have been removed and an estimate of how long that process could take?
I don't, but I would defer you to the Pentagon on that. We'll make sure they get you an answer, Karen.
It's an ongoing process, though. It's still actually happening right now.
Again, I would defer you to the Pentagon on anything with respect to clearing mines in the Strait of Hormuz.
Thank you very much. I know that you said that the White House is reviewing the security protocols for things that could be done differently in the future. Have you identified anything so far that you would like to see done differently, or ask the Secret Service to make any changes in the security protocols for the president, particularly at these large events that are taking place off the White House campus?
Not yet, no, but as I said, there will be a meeting here at the White House in the earlier half of this week, so those conversations will take place.
And on the line of succession...
And I would also just add, look, the Secret Service does not detail their procedures or operations to the public for obvious reasons, because you have crazy people who try to hijack them and get around them. So these conversations will take place in private, but if adjustments need to be made to protect the president, they will be made.
Caroline, the White House discussed doing like it does, for instance, with a joint address to Congress for these large events and designating someone as the designated survivor for future large events that the cabinet attends?
Well, those conversations ahead of the walk of dinner did take place, but there were several members of the cabinet in the line of succession who did not attend for various personal reasons. So designating one survivor was not necessary, as we had several members who were not there already.
Caroline, all those people forced to dive under tables and fearing for their lives on Saturday night, including many of the people in this room, myself included. What is the president's message to those people who experienced that terrible trauma and maybe are still fearful today?
I think he would say, as he sort of did on Saturday night, coming in here in his tuxedo, we can't allow these crazy people to let us be afraid. We have to keep moving forward, showing up, doing our job, celebrating our country, and doing what we know is right. But certainly we'd like to see the rhetoric against this president and his supporters toned down, because it is inspiring these crazy people across the country to target not just the president, but those who work for him and those who support him. And it must end.
Is he following the arraignment of the suspect today?
Yes, he is, and I know you all want to follow that too. It's happening in a few minutes, so I'll let you all go. The Department of Justice is also going to be speaking momentarily following the arraignment, and I pray that this is the last time I speak to you for some time until after my maternity leave. So thank you guys. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see all of you. Thanks for coming today, as always. We're going to start with some scheduling announcements. This evening, President Trump will deliver remarks at Union Station for a political dinner. Tomorrow morning, the president will host the second cabinet meeting of the year and the 11th cabinet meeting of his second term. And later tomorrow afternoon, the president will host a Greek Independence Day celebration in the East Room. On Friday, the president will celebrate National Agriculture Day alongside nearly 1,000 farmers who are coming in from across the country for the first event of the season on the South Lawn, so pray for good weather, to highlight the president's successful policies in support of America's farmers, including efforts to lower input costs, open new trade markets, bolster the farm safety net, double the death tax exemption, end taxes on rural property loan interest, and create rural opportunity zones. Also, I'm pleased to announce that President Trump's meeting and a long-awaited meeting with President Xi in China will now take place in Beijing on May 14th and 15th. First Lady Melania and President Trump will also host President Xi and Madam Peng for a reciprocal visit in Washington, D.C. at a later date to be announced this year. Turning to the ongoing military operations in Iran, the United States military continues to decimate the terrorist Iranian regime's offensive and defensive capabilities. Just over 3 weeks in, it's abundantly clear that Operation Epic Fury has been a resounding military triumph. More than 9,000 enemy targets have been struck to date. Compared to the start of the operation, Iran's ballistic missile attacks and drone attacks are down by roughly 90%. The United States is also annihilating the Iranian regime's navy. We have destroyed more than 140 of their naval vessels, including almost 50 mine layers. This is the largest elimination of a navy over a 3-week period since World War II. Again, let me reiterate, this is the largest elimination of a navy on the face of the planet in a 3-week period since World War II. We are systematically dismantling Iran's defense industrial base, which will prevent future threats to the region. Our military also remains laser focused on eliminating the regime's threat to the free flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz. Over the weekend, we dropped several 5,000-pound bombs on an underground facility used to store equipment, including anti-ship cruise missiles and mobile missile launchers positioned along the coastline of the strait. Our military efforts grow more successful with each passing day, steadily degrading Iran's ability to terrorize merchant ships. For all of these reasons, we are very close to meeting the core objectives of Operation Epic Fury, and this military mission continues unabated. From the outset, President Trump and the Department of War estimated it would take approximately 4 to 6 weeks to achieve this critical mission. 25 days in, the greatest military the world has ever known is ahead of schedule and performing exceptionally. Day by day, the Iranian regime is being crippled, and their ability to threaten the United States and our allies is being significantly weakened. Their ambitions of building a nuclear weapon have also been crushed to an even greater degree than they were in Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. That's why you're beginning to see the regime look for an exit ramp. They recognize they are being crushed, their ability to attack American and ally forces, as well as their ability to defend their own territory is dwindling literally hour by hour. Following President Trump's powerful threat on Saturday evening, it was made clear to the United States that Iran wanted to talk. President Trump is willing to listen. As President Trump announced on Monday, the United States has been engaged over the last 3 days in productive conversations, which led the president to temporarily instruct the Department of War to postpone planned strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure only. The remaining elements of the Iranian regime have another opportunity to cooperate with President Trump, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and cease actively threatening America and our allies. But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal. Here at home, we are now on day 40 of the Democrats' shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. Democrats in Congress are forcing American travelers to wait in hours-long lines at airports across the country, robbing TSA officers and other federal workers of their hard-earned paychecks that they use to feed their families, and causing billions of dollars in damage to our economy. A father of 3 recently told CBS News that he felt he had no other choice but to quit his job as a TSA officer and find other work as the Democrats' shutdown of DHS continues. This is the quote from the father, and I encourage everyone to listen. "I think the hardest thing is seeing the struggle that my wife was going through and not trying to bring more stress to her," the father of 3 said, "but seeing her cry every night, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to survive?" For the Democrats in Congress, the cruelty of this shutdown is the point. Nearly 500 TSA officers have quit since the Democrat shutdown began. President Trump, to alleviate this pressure, made the decision to send some of our amazing ICE agents to help alleviate that stress and address the long wait times. And for all of the critics of this solution a few days ago when it was proposed by the president, it is yielding results. Wait times have improved since ICE arrived, and they are doing everything in their power to help their fellow federal service members. But it's important to take a step back and remember, why is this even happening in the first place? For nearly 6 weeks, Democrats in Congress have kept DHS shut down because they care more about illegal aliens than American citizens. You have Democrat elected representatives in states across the country who are willing to inflict massive pain on their own constituents to fight for illegal aliens who broke our nation's laws to come here. In recent days, we saw the deadly consequence of this deranged policy of Democrat open borders and an illegal alien first agenda. A beautiful 18-year-old girl, Sheridan Gorman, she was shot and killed in Chicago last Thursday morning while walking in a park with friends. The suspect in custody for murdering her is a Venezuelan illegal alien who was caught and released at the border by the Biden administration in May of 2023. Why would the Biden administration catch and release a Venezuelan illegal alien? That is not happening anymore under this president. But there are still tens of thousands, if not millions, of these illegal aliens in our country who seek to do harm to innocent Americans, like this beautiful young woman whose family will now never be the same because of her death. To make matters even worse, this monster was also released from local custody again after a shoplifting arrest, where? In the sanctuary city of Chicago in June of 2023. Again, another innocent American citizen had her life stolen from her because Democrats embrace reckless open border policies and reckless sanctuary city policies, which put criminals back into American communities. How many more Americans have to die before the Democrats end this madness? President Trump's position is very clear. He wants the federal government opened, he wants the Department of Homeland Security funded, and he wants the Democrat shutdown to end immediately. The president will also continue to call on Democrat leaders in sanctuary cities and states like J.B. Pritzker, where this young, beautiful girl was murdered, to cooperate with ICE and stop releasing illegal alien criminals into American neighborhoods. It is for the safety of every American citizen, including all of the people in this room. With that, I will take your questions, and here in our new media seat today, we have Gabe Fleischer.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks,
Two questions.
Gabe, for being here.
Thank you. I have two questions for you. First, if the war in Iran continues past this current round of peace talks, and with thousands of troops on their way to the Middle East, is there a point, either a number of ground troops or a number of days, at which the president will consider seeking authorization from Congress?
Well, as you know right now, that formal authorization from Congress is not necessary because we're currently in major combat operations in Iran. The Department of War and the President, as I said, estimated about a 4 to 6 week timeline for the full completion of these military combat operations. We're again on day 25 today. And as a courtesy, nevertheless, the administration did notify Congress, the Gang of Eight, ahead of the launch of the operation 25 days ago. And we've also had our top national security officials go to Capitol Hill to brief lawmakers, again, out of courtesy and out of respect for them. So at this moment, it's unnecessary, but of course, the President and this administration will always abide by the law. Gabe, or do you have a follow-up?
Yes,
sure, go ahead.
Second question. In my reporting, I speak a lot to young voters, many of whom voted for President Trump for the first time in 2024, hoping to have no more wars and to have lower prices. Now, with the war taking place and with gas prices going up, curious what President Trump's message would be to those voters who kind of swung into his coalition in 2024, but maybe don't feel the administration is going as they had expected.
President Trump is doing this for you. He's doing this for young people so that we are no longer threatened by a rogue terrorist regime in the Middle East that seeks to kill the brave men and women who serve in our country in the Middle East, many of them young people themselves, young men and women who serve this country honorably in uniform and have been threatened, killed, and maimed by the rogue Iranian terrorist regime for 47 years. President Trump finally had the courage to step up and do what's right by our national security, our homeland security. As for the temporary short-term fluctuation in gas prices, the president has said once these combat operations are over, this administration is going to continue to unleash American energy dominance. We're continuing to do that every day, and we're going to see prices at the pump go back down, just as we have over the past year because of this president. And don't think for 1 second if that the Democrats had their way, gas prices would be as they were under the previous administration, the Biden administration, record highs. This president is keeping them as low as he can during this short-term combat operation, and they're going to go right back down when this is over. Gabe.
Thank you, Caroline. Just within the past few hours, Iranian state TV has said that Iran has rejected the U.S.'s 15-point plan to end the war. What's the White House's response to that, and have these talks hit a dead end?
They have not. Talks continue. They are productive, as the president said on Monday, and they continue to be. However, I saw a 15-point plan that was floated in the media. I would caution reporters in this room from reporting about speculative points or speculative plans from anonymous sources. The White House never confirmed that full plan. There are elements of truth to it, but some of the stories I read were not entirely factual. So I am not going to negotiate on behalf of the president here at the podium. What I will tell you is these talks are ongoing. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty details that have been exchanged between the United States and Iran at this time.
Well, yesterday the president mentioned a very big present that the Iranians had given the U.S. He wouldn't go into detail, but was it that ship that was carrying 2 million barrels of oil that made it through the Strait of Hormuz?
I'll let the president speak on that at the appropriate time.
And then finally, Caroline, today Iraq's government reportedly is planning to lodge a protest with the U.S. According to the Wall Street Journal. There was an attack in Iraq that hit a military clinic, killing 7 soldiers reportedly. What's the U.S.'s response to that? Was the U.S. responsible for that attack?
I'll have to check in with the Pentagon on that, and we'll get you an answer.
Thank you, Caroline. Too, if I may. Speaker Johnson today described the conflict as wrapping up, but the 82nd Airborne Division, they're typically deployed at the beginning of conflicts. So does the White House consider this conflict as wrapping up, or is it changing shape?
As I said at the beginning of my remarks, we are meeting our goals of Operation Epic Fury expeditiously. The president likes to maintain options at his disposal. It's the Pentagon's job to provide those options to the commander-in-chief. For any specifics on troop deployments, though, I would point you to the Pentagon.
And today, Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner reiterated threats to potentially arrest ICE agents that were sent in to assist with these historically long TSA lines. He said, quote, "The president cannot pardon you." Has the president seen Krasner's comments? Does he have any response?
The president cannot pardon you for what? He's talking to the ICE agents who are handing out water bottles and are helping people move through lines at airports. It's a disgraceful comment. The men and women of ICE are great people. I would encourage this lawmaker, whose name I don't know and don't care to know, to actually sit down and speak with the ICE agents who are on the ground doing this important work, not just in our nation's airports, but again, to remove violent, dangerous, illegal alien criminals from our country, to protect this individual and all of us in this room and Americans across the country from murderers, pedophiles, and rapists who have been allowed into our country by Democrat politicians. Mario, good to see you.
Thank you, Caroline. Good to see you as well. Just given that the president postponed his original trip to China because of the war, should we infer that the war will be wound down and concluded by the time of that May 15th, 14th visit?
Again, as I've said, we've always estimated approximately 4 to 6 weeks, so you could do the math on that, Mario, but we do look forward, I know the president looks forward to going to China on May 14th and 15th, and of course, as always, we'll provide additional logistical details to all of you in the media for that trip, who I know look forward to coming with us as well.
One follow-up. Was that a precondition? Did the two leaders speak about the conclusion of the war? Was that a precondition for them to have this rescheduled meeting?
No, there was a discussion about the rescheduling of the meeting between the president and President Xi. President Xi understood that it's very important for the president to be here throughout these combat operations right now. He understood, obviously, the request to postpone and accepted it, which is why we have new dates on the books, and I'm happy to announce those to you today. Jennifer.
On the negotiations with Iran, are there still face-to-face talks planned perhaps in Pakistan? And who do you think would probably be going?
Again, I've seen a lot of speculation and reporting about potential talks that could happen later this week. Nothing should be deemed official until it is announced formally by the White House. I would not get ahead of our skis on reporting about any talks this weekend until you hear directly from us.
Does the president think that all of the allies will go along with whatever the U.S. concludes with these Iranians? Are you expecting that Israel and all the other allies will follow whatever agreement is made?
I think the president has shown that he is absolutely the leader of the free world, the head of the most powerful military in the world, and in various examples, so the 12-day war between Iran and Israel, the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza, the president has shown a very unique skill at getting our allies to get on board with what's in the best interest of the United States, but also the world in cases of foreign policy like this. Ed.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. So, is there a time frame as to when the first oil tanker can go through the Strait of Hormuz freely?
It's a very good question, Ed. I don't have a specific timeline for you today, but it's obviously something the administration is working towards as quickly as we can. And with respect to oil, as you know, the administration has taken a number of actions to stabilize the markets. We directed the U.S. DFC to offer reasonably priced political risk insurance for takers through the strait. We issued that temporary waiver to allow countries to purchase sanctioned Russian oil to alleviate global pressures. We're working with the IEA to coordinate the release of another 400 million barrels. We issued that 60-day Jones Day Act waiver. And then just today, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, if you missed it, in consultation with the Department of Energy, announced a temporary emergency fuel waiver to allow nationwide sales of E15, gasoline blended with 15% ethanol, to remove all federal impediments to selling E10 gasoline across the country. The emergency fuel waiver will temporarily waive the summer low volatility requirements and blending limitations limitations for gasoline to provide additional flexibility to the fuel marketplace. So as far as tankers through the strait, something we're tracking very closely, but obviously the administration is coming up with creative new solutions by the day to keep the price of oil stable, something the president wants to see. And I know Secretary Bessent, Secretary Wright, Secretary Burgum, EPA Administrator Zeldin are all working together closely to find ways to do that.
The president gave that 5-day timeline for pause in operations. Would a tanker going through the Strait of Hormuz be one of the conditions that he would extend that?
That's only something the President of the United States can answer. I won't get ahead of him.
How about on TSA? Can I ask you about the TSA lines?
Sure.
Are the TSA lines, we've all seen the video of that from various airports, is that going to be what ends the stalemate in Congress to get DHS funded?
Well, look, it's the Democrats who have led to this stalemate over the past 6 weeks. The president and the Republicans' position has been very clear. Fund the Department of Homeland Security. And we've attempted in good faith numerous times, both the president himself and lawmakers on the Republican side on Capitol Hill, to go to the Democrats with reasonable offers, with real solutions. They'll ask for something, we'll give them that concession, and then they say, oh wait, that's not enough, actually. So I think that's why I said earlier, the cruelty is the point. They want this chaos. They want to distract, I think, from the success of our military overseas right now, totally obliterating the Iranian regime. And it's very unfortunate because there's only, the only people that are suffering from this are the American people. And I hear that Democrats might be flying out of town tomorrow. How convenient and lovely of them that they get to go to the airport and that they'll get to go home to their families when you have families, TSA workers who are suffering. You have people across the country who are missing flights for funerals and for work commitments because of Democrat politicians on Capitol Hill.
Caroline.
Mary, in the back.
Thanks, Caroline.
Glad to see you have a seat now.
I do. Thank you. Is the White House satisfied with Republican leadership's efforts on the Save America Act?
I think the president has made it very clear he wants everyone on Capitol Hill to move as quickly as possible to get the Save America Act passed, and he wants to see that legislation on his desk as soon as Republicans and Democrats can move to pass it.
But are there any lawmakers in Congress that the president is frustrated with on this matter and feels could be doing a better job?
I think the president wants to see everybody on Capitol Hill move faster all the time. That he wants everyone in this town to work at Trump speed like we do here at the White House. We'll go to Karen.
Caroline, 2 questions on Lebanon, if I can. Is the U.S. providing support at this point for Israel's ongoing offensive in Lebanon? And is the president concerned that right now there are more than 1 million people who've been displaced and potentially could be for a significant amount of time?
That's not something I'm in a position to comment on. For the first question, to the second question, of course, that's something that would concern the president. I think that's why he's again quickly moving to eliminate the threat of the Iranian regime in the Middle East, including weakening their proxies like Hezbollah, who have terrorized Lebanon for far too long. And I know that the president wants to see this, again, move as quickly as possible as we can over the course of the next couple of weeks here.
Kristen. Caroline. Question about the Strait of Hormuz. If these negotiations are not successful, is the only option to reopen the strait in boots on the ground, given that all of our allies have essentially said that they are unable or unwilling to help?
Look, that's a hypothetical question. It's a hypothetical question. It's also a decision that would have to be made by the commander-in-chief, and I'm not going to get ahead of him.
And in addition to that, when it comes to the Vice President, J.D. Vance, what has changed that has made him more of an active participant in these negotiations with Iran?
I don't think anything has changed. The Vice President has always been a key member, the President's right-hand man, and a key member of the President's national security team. He's been part of these discussions throughout this entire course of the administration with respect, again, to the 12-day war that the President and his national security team negotiated a solution to, with respect to the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza and the release of the hostages, which there was a lot of criticism that couldn't get done, and it did. The Vice President has been by the President's side every step of the way, and any reporting otherwise is just completely false. I see him in the room. Again, the President seeks his counsel on all matters, both foreign and domestic.
Can you just tell us who exactly the U.S. is negotiating with in Iran and why the U.S. and this administration trusts that person?
Again, as I said to Gabe's question earlier, we're not going to get into the details of these negotiations and conversations that continue to take place. As of course you can imagine, they are very sensitive diplomatic discussions. And I would reiterate, I do recall giving all of you the same answer when we were negotiating the ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. Gave you the same answer throughout the 12-day war between Iran and Israel. Gave you the same answer with respect to many of the other global conflicts that this administration has negotiated solutions to. President Trump is going to give his diplomats the freedom that they need to have these sensitive diplomatic discussions without negotiating and litigating them through the news media. Fran.
Caroline, just to follow up though, because you said that some of the information that's been out there about the 15-point plan is inaccurate, can you say what is accurate with respect to ballistic missiles, the nuclear ambitions, and the Strait of Hormuz, which are things that the president has laid out that he wants to see a couple times in the past?
Look, if you've heard it from the President of the United States, obviously it's true, as well as the objectives of Operation Epic Fury. We've said repeatedly, I've said them from this podium, the Pentagon has reiterated them. That's why we've taken military action to achieve them. So of course, those are goals that we want to see, but this full 15-point plan that's been floating around in many of your outlets, there's a lot of misinformation to that as well. And again, I would caution you from taking things from anonymous sources rather than verifying them directly with the White House. Christian.
Thanks, Caroline. 2 on Iran. First, would the president consider loosening asylum restrictions for Iranians trying to flee the country right now?
Again, that's a question for the president. I won't get ahead of him on that. I haven't talked to him about that.
Okay. And then secondly, you mentioned at the top that Iran would be hit harder than they have been to this point if they don't recognize the fact that they're losing this war. Could those strikes happen before this 5-day negotiating window closes if the president doesn't think they're negotiating in good faith?
You're asking me to tell you if the commander-in-chief would authorize very strong strikes against the Iranian regime. That's not something I would ever reveal from this podium, true or not. Phil.
Here, in the back. Thank you, Caroline. I was wondering if you would respond to some of this criticism of the administration from past allies like Joe Kent, who have said that the president's red line shifted from Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon to Iran cannot pursue nuclear enrichment. What is the administration's response to that criticism?
I think the president and I have both strongly responded to the criticism by Mr. Kent, who unfortunately resigned in disgrace and accused the president of basically being controlled by foreign countries and foreign manipulation, which is a ridiculous and laughable assertion. So his accusations have zero credibility as far as this White House is concerned.
The question of the red line shifting from no nuclear weapon to no nuclear enrichment, is there any substance to that argument?
I think the president has been quite clear in what he wants to see from the Iranian regime, which is why he chose to launch Operation Epic Fury in the first place. Reagan.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a question for you on the SAVE Act, and I'd like to follow up on the DHS shutdown.
Sure.
First, Senator Mike Lee.
The Save America Act.
Save America Act. The president corrected me yesterday. That was my fault. Senator Mike Lee said it's essentially impossible to pass the Save America Act through reconciliation. What's your reaction to that? Is the president worried that that strategy might fail?
I think he's willing to try all strategies. I spoke with him about this yesterday, and he said if we can make it work through reconciliation, let's absolutely do that. These, again, are common sense policies that are backed by the vast majority of voters across this country. The only people in this country who don't support them are politicians on Capitol Hill, and you all should ask them why they don't want voter ID, why they don't want proof of citizenship to vote in our nation's elections. Again, these are common sense proposals that are wildly popular, and the president is willing to use any means necessary to get this legislation passed and onto his desk.
And then on the DHS shutdown, do you expect deportations to decrease while ICE is in the airports? And what are the trade-offs of having ICE in the airports right now?
Well, to address this obviously short-term problem and the chaos that has been sowed by these Democrats on Capitol Hill, to address the lines and to get Americans traveling and get them to where they need to be. So the president, I think this was a creative solution, again, that was criticized, but we have seen wait times decrease, not as much as we'd like. Hopefully they will continue to, but at major airports over the course of the last few days as ICE has been facilitating with travelers in these airports. Sure, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline. On March 6th, the president said in an interview with Reuters that the U.S. should have a role in choosing Iran's next leadership. Now that we're almost 4 weeks into the operation, is that still the president's assessment of where it should go?
As I've said repeatedly, I think the president obviously believes the United States wants to have someone in leadership position in the Iranian regime that will be much more favorable, that will be willing to work with the United States, that will no longer chant death to America. These would obviously be good common sense things for the United States and for our allies. I think that's what the president meant when he spoke with Reuters that day. Go ahead.
The president yesterday said that he had achieved regime change in Iran because the regime has changed. In terms of...
I mean, has it not?
Well, the leadership...
Their entire leadership has been killed, and nobody has really seen or legitimately heard from this alleged new leader. So wouldn't you say there's been a change in the regime?
There's been a change in leadership. I mean, do you feel
There's been a change
as though...
in the regime leadership, which is what the president said. So thank you for confirming he was right.
I mean, do you feel as though you've achieved leadership level, or the personnel in place right now in Iran that you're satisfied with? I mean, have you...
I think it's too soon to say.
In terms of highly enriched uranium in Iran right now, is your expectation, I mean, the stated desire of the president has been to prevent nuclear weapons. Is your expectation that the end game here is that eventually Americans will be in possession of that uranium, or you'll somehow have some direct control over the highly enriched uranium that could be used to develop it?
Again, this is a point of conversation that continues. I think you know the means in which the United States would have to take in order to achieve that goal, and that's a decision for the president to make. Brian, good to see you, Brian Glenn.
Good to see you as well. Does the White House have a comment on a letter that was sent from Congressman Raskin to the DOJ alleging that the DOJ recklessly released damning information in regards to President Trump's documents?
Yes, I saw that letter from Congressman Raskin this morning, who I would add has zero credibility, and this letter was clearly a cheap political stunt. What the congressman did here, Brian, and for everyone in the room who's hopefully not reporting on this as fact, is that he took untrue and salacious claims in a memo that was produced by Jack Smith, who has been completely discredited for his lawfare and his witch hunts against this president, and that information was unverified. It never even made it into the indictment because it was so unverified. And what happened to that indictment anyway? It was thrown out. And Jack Smith has been proven, again, to be a prosecutor on a witch hunt against President Trump. He tried to throw him in jail ahead of the 2024 election. The Biden Department of Justice was fully on board with this lawfare campaign. And in fact, this story that was concocted by Congressman Raskin was so ridiculous, I understand his communications team reached out to some outlets in this room who responsibly said, we're not going to write this because this is just too much. However, of course, MS Now did write that story this morning because they continue to be left-wing propaganda for the Democrat Party. But I think Jack Smith has been proven to be a liar and a fraud, and this is, again, a cheap political stunt from a Democrat on Capitol Hill who I think wants to get himself on cable television. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. This is a very big announcement. We just, as you know, left the military. That was something. Generals, admirals, all the top brass, and that was a great morning. And this is other fantastic news for you because it's going to be a lowering of medical prices, drug prices, like in the history of our country has never happened before. It's favored nations, if you know what that means, but we'll talk about it. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that one of the world's largest pharmaceutical manufacturers and one of the best anywhere in the world, Pfizer, has agreed to offer countless prescription medications at major discounts in the United States as a result of the most favored nation drug pricing order that we established earlier this year. As you know, the United States is paying sometimes 10 times more than other countries for drugs, and a lot of excuses were made for that, but it went on for many years, many years, decades. And it's not going on any longer. We're going to be paying the lowest price now. We're going to be paying whatever the lowest price is, favored nations. This will save American taxpayers and consumers hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I want to thank Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla, who is one of the most respected people in the industry and in business generally. I will say that, Albert, for joining us today, along with Secretary, as you know, we got a number of secretaries. Secretary is behind me, I hope. Where's Lutnick?
He's over here, to the right.
You can get over here. I'm looking for Lutnick. Great Secretary of Commerce. Good to hear you. Would have been in trouble. Howard Lutnick, great. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., CMS Administrator, Mehmet Oz, Medicare Administrator Chris Plump, and the FDA Commissioner Marty McCary. And I just want to thank them all. They've been working hard on many, many things. I think this is one of the biggest medical announcements that this office has ever made, because we're talking about price reductions, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, that are incredible. For many years, Americans have paid the highest prices anywhere in the world for prescription drugs. They paid far more, 10 times, 13 times, 15 times more than other countries for the exact same product. A major reason is that the American consumers have been subsidizing research and development costs for the entire planet. They put all of that on us, and yet they were the beneficiaries too. So it's being changed as of today. The United States had just 4% of the world's population and consumers, only 13% of all prescription drugs, yet pharmaceutical companies make 75% of their profits from the United States. So think of that. We have 4% of the market, 13% of prescription drugs, and yet, Albert, I didn't know you were that violent. I'm surprised you're doing this.
I'm getting better.
No, he's doing the right thing. Thank you. And yet they make 75% of their profits from the American customers, so it's something. That's why I signed an executive order combating this practice, and we signed it very happily a little while ago. Today, Pfizer is committing, as will other drug companies as we go through the weeks. But Pfizer is truly one of the biggest in the world and one of the greatest in the world. Today, Pfizer is committing to offer all of their prescription medications to Medicaid, and it will be at the most favored nation's prices. It's going to have a huge impact on bringing Medicaid costs down like nothing else. I told you that in my first term, I was so proud of the fact that for the first time in 28 years, drug prices came down. And I had a news conference that I explained it was 1/10 of 1%, but it was down. And here we're talking about, in one case, over 1,000%. This is a critical step forward to our work and to improve health care and hardworking, low-income Americans, especially low-income Americans, who will be helped so greatly. In addition, Pfizer is agreeing to provide some of their most popular current medications to all consumers at heavily discounted prices of anywhere between 50 and even 100%. And that's off the price. And in some cases, even more than that. These drugs will be available for direct purchase online at a website operated by the federal government. We're also announcing that moving forward, all new medications introduced by Pfizer to the American market will be sold at the reduced most favored nation cost. So we'll be paying essentially what other countries are paying, who have been much lower for many, many years. Furthermore, Pfizer will invest $70 billion to reshore domestic manufacturing facilities. In other words, they're going to bring a lot of their facilities to make their drugs and make what they make, their product. They're going to make it in the United States. I appreciate that $70 billion investment and fund research and development right here in America. We're working with other major pharmaceutical companies to secure similar agreements. Everyone understands that the status quo where Americans pay more for drugs, prescription drugs, and they pay more than foreign countries who take advantage of us in many other ways, although not so many anymore. I think we've pretty well got that stopped, right? I think so. We've stopped that, but they took advantage of a lot of other precedents, that I can tell you. But we're making this pay to be very unacceptable, what they've done in the past. That's why my administration is also taking historic action to investigate the unfair and discriminatory trade practices of other countries that extort our pharmaceutical makers to shift costs onto the American consumer. They say, no, give us a price, a very low price, and just charge the American consumer, charge it to the U.S. The United States is done subsidizing the health care of the rest of the world. It's a big thing. I can't tell you how big this is. And I was all set to go on a first term, but then you had the COVID, and we had to focus on that. But I said, I want to get back here, because you're talking about 14, 15, 1,600% reductions in some cases. But by taking this bold step, we're ending the era of global price gouging at the expense of American families, and we're making America healthy again, which is our little theme for the people behind me. And I want to just ask Secretary Kennedy to come up, and we'll start, and we'll go through it with Oz and Klomp and Bourla and McCary, and we'll go through it, and if you have any questions. But this is a really big announcement. This is something that most people said was not doable. And other countries are going along because we told them that if you don't go along, they didn't have to go along. But if they didn't go along, we were going to put extra tariffs on those countries. And we were going to charge them the amount of money that they should be paying for the reduction in costs. So I think we had a pretty good negotiating position. So, Bobby, I'd like you to speak about this, and what a great job, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by thanking a couple of people who aren't up here, Theo Merkel, Dr. Heidi Overton, who played key roles in this negotiation and helped make this happen. And also Inma Hernandez, who's not up here, but John Brook and Chris Klomp, who were the people who were negotiating, in some cases, I think including last night, 24 hours without any sleep. This would not have happened without President Trump's leadership. I told my son last night, we're all under secrecy about this, but I told my son late last night, a 27-year-old son, Connor, who's a very liberal Democrat, and I told him this was happening, and he just paused for a minute, and he said, "Thank you, Dad, I'm so proud of you." Because this is something Democrats have wanted for 20 years, Republicans have wanted for 20 years. Everybody said they're going to do it. Nobody has even taken a step towards doing it. And the reason was because it was such a daunting task. And, even all of the negotiators, you see, I also want to thank Howard Lutnick. This would not have happened without him. But even all of the negotiators here and all the people on at HHS and at the White House team, all we could see was all the reasons that this couldn't happen. Everybody had tried. Nobody could make it happen. And it was President Trump alone who, with his doggedness, his persistence, he saw this clearly in a way that none of us other, in its most simplest terms. Why are we spending more on this country than any other country? Why are we spending 75% of the revenues that come to the pharmaceutical industry? We're doing all the research, and everybody else is riding on our slipstream. And President Trump, I would say, harangued and harassed us to make this happen. I was getting calls at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. "Oh, are you asleep? And you got to get MFN done." And at one point, Dr. Oz told me, "I can't take the president's calls anymore." I have a lot of reasons. My wife has a lot of reasons to say to me about different things that happen in my life. Doesn't that give you anxiety? And I say, I don't get anxiety. This gave me anxiety. Oh, thank you, President Trump. It would not have happened without your leadership. This is real leadership. It's a president who has a vision and makes that vision happen. And I can't think of any other president of the United States who could have done this in our history. I'm very grateful to you. This is an extraordinary benefit to the American people. Thank you for your vision, President Trump, your bold action, your unwavering commitment to health and well-being of the American people. Never has a president stood up so bravely for the American people with respect to health care. And by the way, I forgot to thank Albert Bourla. Albert and I have had a long history of antipathy and antagonism toward each other. But I have to say his leadership in this took tremendous courage. And he really created a template for corporate responsibility, for putting public health ahead of his individual interests. So I'm very, very grateful to you for that, Albert. Under the leadership of President Trump, the U.S. government is now acting as a tough negotiator on behalf of the American people. Today is about fairness, it's about equality, it's about giving hope to those who are trying to stay healthy, who are managing illness, and who are fighting for their lives. We refuse to make the most vulnerable citizens continue to pay an unthinkable price for the world's pharmaceutical breakthroughs, which we pay for. This policy is a shield for the chronically ill who have carried the burden of high drug costs for far too long. It's a signal to every American family that we're finally putting their health and financial security first. And it sets a new standard, one that says we won't write blank checks to the drug industry any longer. No family should ever be forced to choose between filling a prescription and putting food on the table. Americans should not be gouged paying 300 or 400 or 1,000% more than people in other countries for the exact same drug, many times manufactured in the same factory in New Jersey and sold in Great Britain for 1/10 the price that it's being sold for here. This week, and I was with some friends up in Martha's Vineyard, and an old friend, one of my oldest friends, his wife and daughter have a chronic disease. And that chronic disease last year cost $150,000 to treat. And the mother had to choose whether she was going to take that money and spend it on her or her daughter. And she spent it on her daughter. So she had to make that choice. It's a choice that no mother should have to make. We did a roundtable recently on drug prices. One patient spent more than $180,000 on one drug. One cashed in all of her savings and worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. One almost quit her job and moved to Germany to get the drug cheaper. Some looked at getting the drug on unsafe secondary markets because they could not afford it through the legitimate markets. Today, we begin to right that ship. For the mother trying to help her child get better, for a grandmother at the pharmacy counter, and for millions of Americans who want to restore their health. Today is about another promise made by President Trump and another promise kept by President Trump to the American people. And it's only just the beginning. This is all thanks to your unwavering leadership, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
There is a fine line between vision and hallucination. People have to follow you for it to be a vision. And President Trump, you made a lot of people following you, an idea that most people thought was not possible, even remotely. And when we have that shared vision, and I'll speak to some of the people who are involved in this process because it was incredible effort that gives me great pride to serve in this administration. And the fact that it did not leak is also an issue of pride for us because these were tough challenges. And Albert Bourla looks very calm up here and cat-like, but he is ferocious when you get him in a negotiating room. This is true for all the pharmaceutical companies that we are negotiating with. And Secretary Kennedy, my son Oliver, who I told about this deal as we was walking over here, is a Republican. And you know what he said? Thank you for making us proud. Because it's not just a Democratic problem, it's a Republican problem. This has not happened before. And it took a crusader like President Trump, with the support of Secretary Kennedy, Secretary Lutnick, I see the vice presidents here as well, just unwavering, dogged pursuit of change. And now I have to admit that I know the president has me on speed dial, and most of the time when he would call me, as Secretary Kennedy alluded to, it was about MFN, and he always had reasons why we needed to go faster and why people were being hurt today because we're allowing the kinds of pricing that had been tolerated for so many decades in America. The time of the day didn't matter, the day of the week didn't matter, and that's how the president was functioning. This was such an important part of what he saw as his legacy, which is why it brings such pride to all of us up here and many others to deliver it. And the laser focus that the president had on this, which he shared with me the day that I was nominated, that he nominated me for this position and has reminded me frequently since, made it a top priority for us as well at CMS. Now, to do this, you have to have tactics, not just vision, but tactics. And the first tactic the president shared was to introduce me to Albert Bourla. He took us to dinner with Secretary Kennedy, and he argued, and he's a great deal maker, as you know, that if you're going to make a deal of this scope, of this nature, you need trust. So the president lit the kindling, he got the embers going, but he needed us to nurture that beginning of a fire so they would blaze into what today we can announce as the grand deal, one of the greatest ever, certainly in the space of pharmaceuticals. I gained to respect Albert, and I'll tell you why in particular. It was because he recognized the dangerous problems facing so many Americans, that they had to choose between taking medications prescribed by their doctor that could be life-saving or shopping at the grocery store, paying for their kids, a fundamentally important need that would be squeezed out because they couldn't compromise on drugs, or often worse, they compromise on the drugs. 1/3 of all prescriptions are not filled in the pharmacy because of this. We talked through the winter. We talked through the spring. We talked through the summer. And we got nowhere. We stalled. The industry is powerful. They're important. They have smart people. There's no reason for them to give the numbers that the president is articulating today. And you see these numbers on the charts around us. These are massive wins for the American people. But the president in July demanded, after the executive order, that manufacturers make a firm commitment and to lower prices or else. And it sent shockwaves through the industry. It got the ball rolling again. Our talks with Albert heated up. But it wasn't until last week, if you want an inside story, it wasn't until last week that we made a major breakthrough. And our hardworking team embarked on a remarkable story that I think books will be written about, 24/7, nonstop, with industry, with Albert, with his great team at Pfizer. And with this partnership, we began to deal with the fundamental challenges we have, which is protecting medical advances for the future, while at the same time securing the prices Americans want today. We're going to continue to stimulate and strengthen innovation. That's what a great country does, and we are a great country with a great leader. We're going to protect the U.S. hegemony in R&D. We dominate the planet in discovering cures for illnesses. All those orphan ailments, all those remarkable advances, they come from research labs here with companies like Pfizer and other great ones in the pharmaceutical space. We're going to lead in the life sciences. We're going to lead in ideas. And we're going to make sure that we do all that while we're being fair to the American people, especially our most vulnerable. We're going to finally deliver on the fair drug prices that President Trump has been speaking about for 2 terms. We're going to celebrate this historic day, I predict, this historic day in the medical field for generations to come. The heroic negotiators that I do feel compelled to mention, and Secretary Kennedy kindly also mentioned their names. Some of them can't be in here because they're busy negotiating future deals. Inma Hernandez-Delso, John Brooks, who's a deputy administrator of mine, Theo Merkel, who is in the back and tall and hard to miss with DPC, and Corey Enslin with the same group did a spectacular job, and Don Dempsey at OMB. Just wonderful human beings worked tirelessly to get this done. We were able to secure this first MFN deal, and the president touched on this, but we have much more to come. You'll be hearing breaking news from the president for the rest of the fall. And Mr. President, these brilliant minds are here because of you. Now, I don't want to just pay homage to this. I want to actually speak this a little bit. The passion to protect the American people brings top-tier Americans into the government. We've created a powerful administration with the president's leadership, an administration of winners. People get things done. They see the generational opportunity to fix the biggest problems our nation faces. And the person who led this negotiation, Chris Klump, embodies this seal. Now, Chris Klump came to visit Secretary Kennedy and I the very first day we were looking for staff to try to bring in the government. And neither of us really had an idea of how challenging this might be. And he came to the interview, and we knew that he had built a business that was worth several $100 million. And the secretary, very poker-faced as he tends to be, looked at him and said, "Are you willing to give it all up and move your family to Washington?" A young family, 4 young children, beautiful wife. "Are you willing to come across the country and serve our nation, serve this president to ensure vital programs like Medicare, which he runs, will keep our seniors healthy for years to come?" He gave it all up, like so many have in this administration, passionate to follow the president's lead and serve under Secretary Kennedy. And for those of you at home who are watching, and I hope there are quite a few, I think this shows just how cool a place it is to work, is in this government. And I take great pride in handing the ball to Chris. Chris, tell the American people what they have won, thanks to your passionate ability to deliver on President Trump's promise.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. President. You have enabled something that as recently as last night, nearly everyone has said was impossible. And Secretary Kennedy and Administrator Oz, thank you for having trust in us as a negotiating team to drive this forward on behalf of the American people. It is an absolute honor and privilege. And Mr. Borla, to you and to the team at Pfizer, you have taken a step that I think few appreciate, requires a level of courage to change something that for decades administrations have tried. And there was no incentive rationally for you to do, and yet you've done it because you recognized the opportunity to align your economic interest with the social interest of the American people, and we're grateful. Today is historic, as has been discussed. this is a major win in the battle for affordable healthcare and affordable drugs. As the president said, on average, we pay nearly 3 times what the rest of the wealthy world pays for branded pharmaceuticals. And yet we drive more than 50% of global R&D, 50% of revenues, nearly 70% of profits. It's unjust. It's morally unjust. And when this happens, we stifle innovation and we limit access for the most vulnerable people across the planet and in America who need these medications. And so the president directed us to make deals. That's what he does, and it's what we do. And all great deals, and this is a great deal, are rooted in principles. And this deal was rooted in the principle of fairness. Now, the president could have directed us to go to the poorest country on the planet and find the cheapest price for every single drug and bring that back to the United States and use the might of the government to insist that that's the price we pay. And that might have worked, actually, for just a little bit. But very quickly, it would have utterly destroyed innovation in pharmaceuticals. It would have destroyed American primacy in building life-saving medications. There are nearly 20,000 known diseases on the planet. We have treatments or cures for far fewer than 10% of them. So that would have been a bad strategy, and it would have limited access to those who need those medications the most. But he didn't call for that. He didn't call for 50% lower than the lowest price on the planet. What he called for was fairness. And that's a powerful principle, because we all grow up wanting to be on the right side of fair. And it allowed us to do what has not been done before, which is to call on manufacturers and ask them to be fair, and allows us to go to countries and ask them to pay their fair share in the battle against global disease. And that is the unlock for this great deal. Now, it's my privilege to talk just for a few minutes about the details of the deal. First, let's start with the definition of MFN. What do we mean by that? This is not made-up list prices that have often been quoted in prior administrations, stuffed with fees and rebates. We're talking about we start at net prices, after fees, after rebates, the prices people actually pay here, the prices people actually pay in other wealthy countries. We then index to a basket of countries, wealthy countries, across the world. And we go drug by drug, and we look for the lowest price. And that becomes the starting point for what an MFN price is in the United States. And then we've built this principles of fairness on 5 key pillars, as we've talked about. Number 1, as has been discussed, direct access for patients at Trump RX, which is a site soon to be launched, available often at full MFN and always at lower prices than currently available. This is bypassing middlemen. It increases transparency. In many instances, prices are 80% lower than they are today. No more Canadian detours to purchase drugs more inexpensively at our neighbor. You do it from home. You do it a click. This is American ingenuity outsmarting the system. Number 2, the president was very clear to us and directed us to ensure that we secured the lowest prices for the most vulnerable Americans, those who are served by Medicaid. So we focused there first. So Pfizer will be putting virtually all of its portfolio of drugs at MFN prices available to Medicaid in the near future. This safeguards the program. This ensures that this program lives as a lifeline without undue burden on the taxpayer for those who need it most, for our vulnerable Americans whom we are charged morally to care for. The third principle is about future-proofing fairness. This is the idea that Pfizer has committed, as are other manufacturers, that they will not launch a new drug for commercial, Medicare, Medicaid, or cash pay markets at a price that is higher than the other wealthy world. Now, they are free to price their drugs wherever they want. These are not price caps. These are not price controls. They can price however they'd like. We're simply asking them, and they are committing not to undercut us in other countries. This is an essential principle. This allows us to retrain other countries to appropriately value innovation for their citizens, to appropriately understand what fair share means, to contribute global R&D. This allows us not to compromise access for those who need it most. And this is a powerful commitment. The fourth principle is around shared savings. As our commerce colleagues and as our U.S. trade representative colleagues succeed in encouraging other countries to pay more for existing medications, a portion of that will go to fund additional R&D. And a portion of that will repatriate back to the United States to offset prices, lower prices further for Americans on those existing drugs. And the fifth principle, as discussed, with hats off to Secretary Lutnick and Ambassador Jameson Greer from U.S. Trade, is about Pfizer committing to onshore 100% of the value of all imports that it currently imports to the United States, thus ensuring that we seal our great American resurgence. If you're watching this right now and you have been looking for evidence that this is a president who knows and cares about you, who is